Every week, I feel like I'm seeing another post saying that Google search is dying and that Google Ads is next. That people aren't searching anymore, that AI is killing clicks, and that running ads on Google in the next couple of years is basically going to become pointless. And I get why it can feel that way. A lot has changed in the past couple of years, especially with the emergence of AI. But here's the thing, Google is not dying. It's not even shrinking. There are actually more searches happening now than ever before. Google's total search volume actually grew 4.7% compared to 2024. Google still also has over 8.9 billion searches per day and still holds over 90% of the global search engine market. So it is very much far from dead. What is changing is how people are searching and interacting with Google. And more importantly, Google is changing how they are choosing to answer these searches. So in 2024, we started to see Google roll out their AI overview, and we've just seen it continue to grow and become more prevalent in 2025. And that is going to continue to happen into 2026. But how is that going to affect the world of ads? So in this video, we'll talk about how Google Ads is actually changing heading into 2026, why AI overviews and AI mode are going to push costs up even while search volume keeps growing, and what small practical changes you can start testing so that you're not caught off guard when and if these shifts really kick in. So to understand where Google Ads is going, you first have to understand what Google is now, because it is not the same now that it was even a few years ago. Old Google was basically like a librarian. You'd walk up, you'd type in a short question, maybe 2 or 3 keywords, and Google would point you towards websites to help you find an answer. So you did all the work, you clicked around, read articles, watched videos, compared your options, and then eventually made a decision. That's the version of Google that most ad strategies were built for. Short keywords, exact matches, very literal intent. But the new Google has overview and AI mode, which is much closer to a personal assistant. So instead of just pointing you to links, it wants context. So you explain your situation, it asks follow-up questions, it narrows things down for you. So instead of someone typing like running shoes near me, they're having an actual conversation with Google's AI mode, talking about foot type, how they run, how often they run, whether they're training for a marathon or a half marathon, if they've had injuries before. Google isn't just matching words anymore, it is building a picture of intent. And so once Google understands the full situation, ads can't just match keywords anymore, they have to match the intent of that conversation. So that shift from librarian to assistant is the foundation for everything else moving into 2026. So how does this shift change people's behavior online? Well, a study by Ahrefs showed that with the introduction of AI overview, it has reduced the amount of clicks happening to websites by a lot, by almost 35%. And this is one of the biggest reasons that people think Google search is dying, because they are seeing fewer clicks on their website. But fewer clicks doesn't mean fewer searches. What's actually happening is that Google is answering more questions before someone even needs to click on the website. You've probably seen this yourself. You search for something and right at the top, there is the AI overview. And it explains the answer clearly enough that you do not need to scroll, you don't need to open 5 tabs, you don't need to go to a website. And so at first, this mostly showed up on informational searches. People asking questions, how to, doing research, early stage stuff. But recently, Google has started rolling AI overviews into much more intent-focused searches and even branded searches. And so that is a key shift. If Google can answer more of the questions inside the search results, then naturally fewer people are going to click through to websites. So the demand didn't disappear, the friction did. Searches are still happening, you just don't need to click on the website. So this leads to the next questions. What happens with the ads? Because Google gets all their money from clicks on ads. So Google's entire business is still built on that. That part has not changed. And so if the AI overviews are answering more questions directly, Google can't just push the ads further and further down the page and hope that advertisers stick around. It would never work. So instead, ads are starting to move into the answers. So you're seeing this already inside AI overviews throughout 2025, but they're going to become more prevalent. But the new thing is that ads will now be coming into AI mode. So when you go to Google and you search for something, you can now click on AI mode and essentially have a conversation with Google about whatever you're researching or looking for. And this is a massive shift in how people use Google. It's not just searching for a few keywords. You're having a full-on conversation with Google. Think about how people used to search when something was wrong with their car. So they'd start with something vague like, why is my car making a squealing noise? Then they would do another search and another. They would read a couple articles, a couple blogs, maybe watch a YouTube video, check a forum, read Reddit, compare symptoms, and slowly start to piece together that they need a mechanic. So that could take days, sometimes weeks, and multiple searches. And every one of those steps was a separate keyword, a separate query, a separate chance for an ad to show. So now with AI mode, someone starts talking, literally explaining their situation, when the noise happens, how loud it is, whether it changes when they brake, if it has a certain smell to it, if their dash light is on, and Google will ask follow-up questions and start to narrow things down for them. And instead of 6 searches spread out over time, that person reaches the decision in one conversation. And so here's why that matters with ads. Google doesn't just see what they typed, it sees the full context. It sees their urgency, their location, the problem severity, how close they are to taking action. And so that means that ads are no longer being matched to a single keyword. They're being matched to that conversation's intent. And so when ads are matched this way, something really interesting can happen. You usually get fewer clicks, which will increase your cost per click. But the people who do click tend to be further along in their buying process. They tend to be more decisive and more ready to book or buy something. And so this is why when it works properly, it could actually shift and improve your lead quality. But not every ad is eligible to be shown in the AI overview or AI mode. So right now, if you're running a search campaign, chances are you're only running exact match and phrase match, which means it is not eligible to run in AI overview or AI mode. In order to be eligible, you have to be running a specific setup, and that generally means you have to do one of 3 things. You either have to be running a Performance Max campaign, you have to enable AI Max in your search campaigns with your keywords, or you have to be running some broad match in your search campaign types as well. And it's not because Google just wants a chance to burn through your money, it's because Google needs that leeway to change your keywords and focus on intent rather than the words themselves. Google needs enough to be able to put your ads into a conversational tone rather than just 1 or 2 exact match keywords. And conversational search doesn't produce clean, repeatable keywords the way that the old search did. So Google has to rely on signals from that conversation to be able to serve the ad. And broad match gives it the flexibility to interpret the meaning instead of exact phrasing. And so then that brings up the next question that a lot of people are asking. Does this mean that I need to flip everything over to AI and start running a PMax and broad match only and turn on AI Max? The short answer is no. A lot of people will hear AI, they see intent, they see Google pushing PMax and AI Max, and they assume that the move is to flip everything on and immediately let Google's algorithm take everything over. I would not recommend doing that, especially for lead-based businesses. So I am still not a big fan of AI Max for lead gen. It can get loose really fast, and when you're paying for phone calls or form fills, loose just generally means wasted ad spend. Performance Max is a little bit different. I have come around to it a lot in the past couple of months, but there is a big if attached to it. You need to make sure that you have the proper conversion tracking set up for PMax to work properly. Not just surface level stuff, you need clean tracking that tells Google which leads booked appointments and which leads spent money. And even then, I've found that PMax to be very niche specific. So I've seen really strong results in industries like HVAC and automotive and plumbing, industries with high intent and clear problems. But in other industries like healthcare and medical, especially if you're on a limited budget or you need a tight control over messaging and targeting, it tends to not work as well. So no, this is not about going all in on automation. It is about giving Google just enough flexibility to understand the intent of the searcher that you want to go after without fully handing over the keys. So what can you do to lean into these changes for 2026? If you are running a search campaign right now, chances are you're heavily leaning into exact match or phrase match for your keywords, and that's completely still fine. If it is working, definitely do not change it. But what you can start to do is layer in a few long tail broad match keywords. And by long tail, I mean 4 or 5 words or more, not short, vague terms, but longer terms. So these tend to mirror a conversational search a lot better, and they do give Google room to interpret intent without opening the floodgates. Do these changes need to happen today? Also, no. So this is likely going to be a phased rollout throughout the year, but what I would do is keep a close eye on a few of the metrics in your ad account. So if you start to see clicks gradually decreasing month over month while your cost per click keeps climbing, that might be a signal to start testing long tail broad match in your search campaign. Because Google Ads in 2026 isn't just about chasing cheaper clicks, it's about meeting people who are already mid-decision and doing it without losing control of your spend. So once you start to think about Google Ads that way, the platform doesn't feel like it's getting worse, it just feels different. And this is why, even heading into 2026, if you're new to Google Ads or you're starting fresh, you still don't skip the foundations. You don't want to start right away with a Performance Max. You don't want to start by handing everything over to AI. You start with a solid search campaign, bring in data into the account that can then train Google's algorithm. Search is still where intent is the clearest and where control matters the most and where you learn how your market actually behaves. So if you want a step-by-step walkthrough on how to set up a Google Ads search campaign from scratch the right way, I put together a full guide walking through the structure, settings, keywords, and mistakes to avoid. So you can click over and watch that video here, and I'll see you over there.